In the far reaches of the galaxy, humanity had quietly begun to carve out its place among the stars. Centuries ago, Earth had been a struggling, isolated planet, caught between the remnants of ancient wars and the vast unknown of space. Yet, over time, humans grew more than just survivors. They evolved into secret architects of an empire that stretched quietly through the cosmos. The Terran Dominion was born from this ambition, not with the noise of a sudden invasion, but with subtlety and precision. Human settlements were established on distant planets, deep within asteroid belts, and even on moons that no one else cared to explore. These colonies were strategically placed, growing into hubs of trade, culture, and knowledge, yet always hidden in plain sight. Earth's leaders, known only to a select few, had mastered the art of operating in the shadows. They built their empire not with the raw force of weapons, but with the power of intelligence, diplomacy, and innovation. While the galaxy was filled with ancient and powerful species like the Srok, a race of towering reptilians, the mysterious Zephyrians, who could read minds, and the enigmatic Aurelian Guardians, humanity kept its presence small, insignificant. Even, their strength lay in blending in working from the sidelines, never seeking attention. It was a strategy that allowed them to grow, unnoticed by the larger powers who ruled with an iron fist. Years turned into decades, and decades into centuries, and yet humanity's secret empire expanded, its influence weaving through the fabric of galactic politics without drawing the ire of any of the more dominant species. To the galaxy, humanity was still just a small, emerging force, barely worth noticing. But inside the Terran Dominion, whispers began to grow louder. A new generation of leaders, younger and more daring, began to question the silence of their empire. They had seen the rise and fall of many galactic powers, and they knew that humanity could be so much more. Some called for an open declaration, a bold stance that would announce to the galaxy that humanity had arrived, ready to claim its rightful place. Others, however, remained cautious. They feared that revealing themselves too soon could spark a conflict they were not yet prepared to face. For all its growth, the Dominion still lacked the military power of the galactic giants. The leaders who had built this empire in secret understood the risks. They knew that a single misstep could set off a chain of events that could destroy everything they had worked for. The galaxy was a powder keg, and any spark could ignite a war that humanity was not ready to fight. But even as the leaders deliberated in their hidden councils, a subtle shift was taking place. It started with small things: a new military technology, a colony that began to attract more attention, or a rare resource discovered deep within a planet's core. These minor events, at first unnoticed, began to pile up. Rumors spread of new human alliances with neutral factions, of strange new technologies emerging from the shadows, of a race that was slowly growing stronger. The other galactic powers, who had long ignored humanity, began to feel something stir. It was an imperceptible change at first, just whispers in the corners of the galaxy. But it was enough to make the established factions uneasy. They did not yet understand the full scope of what was happening, but something was undeniably different about this human empire that had remained in the background for so long. No one could quite put their finger on it, but the quiet, patient rise of humanity was beginning to leave an impression. It was a quiet rise, but the cracks were starting to show. The time for secrecy was running out. It all began on an ordinary day, when the quiet hum of everyday life across the Terran Dominion was shattered by the arrival of something entirely unexpected. A massive warship, unlike anything humanity had ever encountered, appeared on the outer edge of their space. The ship was unlike any other, dark and sleek, its shape not just unfamiliar, but ominous. The craft loomed in the distance, a towering, blackened structure that sent a chill through the core of the human heart. It didn't move like other ships, nor did it possess any markings that humans recognized. It exuded an aura of dread, an unsettling presence that even the most seasoned commanders of the Dominion had never seen before. The arrival of this alien vessel sent shockwaves through the hidden corridors of the Terran leadership. There was no communication at first, only the strange silhouette on the distant horizon, growing ever closer. When the ship finally did make contact, it was not to declare war. The message was an offer that made the very idea of an invasion seem almost trivial. The Zarathka, they called themselves, an ancient race with a history of conquest, spanning entire star systems, a race that ruled through fear and dominance. They were not here to destroy, they were here to negotiate. The Zarathka proposed an alliance, a chance to unite the stars under a single flag, their flag. For many, the proposition was an opportunity too tempting to ignore. The Zarathka were undeniably powerful, their ships more advanced than anything humanity had ever seen, their reach vast. To join them, to align with their empire, would provide humanity with untold benefits: protection, technology, access to a galactic order. That would be impossible to achieve alone. It could bring a sense of stability to the galaxy, which had long been on the edge of chaos. But not all humans viewed this offer as a gift. The Dominion's leadership was deeply divided. Some of the older, wiser figures saw the Zarathka for what they were: a cold, calculating empire with a history of consuming those they allied with. To join them, they feared, would mean humanity's culture, their identity, and their future would be subsumed into something darker. They argued that to accept the offer was to abandon everything the Dominion had built in the shadows, everything that had kept humanity safe for so long. Others, particularly the younger, more idealistic members of the Council, were drawn to the prospect of joining the Zarathka. They believed that such an alliance could solidify humanity's place in the galaxy, that it was a chance to rise out of the shadows and claim what was theirs by right. It was a tempting thought. Humanity could stand tall among the stars, side by side with the Zarathka, and perhaps even gain advantages that could one day make them a power in their own right. Meanwhile, the galaxy watched from the sidelines. News of the Zarathka's arrival spread quickly. Whispers among the other. Alien races grew louder, each species speculating on what this could mean. The Zephyrians, who could read minds and often stayed neutral, took an interest. The Srak, who valued strength above all, were intrigued but cautious. Even the Aurelian Guardians, who had long stayed aloof from the affairs of the galaxy, began to shift their focus. The Dominion, however, was caught in a whirlwind of debate and uncertainty. The diplomatic channels buzzed with frenzied activity as leaders scrambled to make sense of the Zarathka's true intentions. Was this a simple proposal, or was there something more insidious beneath the surface? No threats had been made, no demands had been issued. But there was a palpable tension in the air, a sense that whatever decision humanity made next could have far-reaching consequences. Humanity had always thrived in the shadows, hidden from the eyes of the galaxy's giants. But now, with the Zarathka looming large on the horizon, the time for quiet diplomacy seemed to be slipping away. Old fears that had long been buried resurfaced, and a new era of uncertainty began to take root. The Dominion could no longer hide behind its walls of secrecy. Something was shifting. The question was, would humanity bow to the overwhelming force of the Zarathka, or would they find the courage to stand on their own, even if it meant facing the unknown? The choice was theirs, but the galaxy was watching, waiting for humanity's next move. As the tension between the Terran Dominion and the Zarathka continued to grow, the true might of humanity began to emerge, but it was not through weapons or open conflict. For centuries, the Dominion had honed a different kind of strength, one that worked in the shadows, far from the gaze of the galaxy's great powers. The Dominion had mastered the delicate art of information warfare, shaping events from behind, the scenes with precision and quiet influence. It was a power that had been cultivated over decades, built on a foundation of subtlety, patience, and a deep understanding of how to manipulate the galaxy's political landscape. Now, as the Zrathka loomed ever closer, the Dominion's vast network of spies, diplomats, and operatives began to shift its focus. It was no longer about staying hidden. It was time to make their influence felt. The Zrathka were powerful, but their empire was not as solid as they appeared. Beneath the surface, cracks had already begun to form. The Zrathka were an ancient race, their history filled with conquest and tyranny. But even the strongest empires eventually faced dissent, and within their society, factions had grown tired of their unyielding ways. Some were quietly questioning the wisdom of their leadership. Others, more daring, were already making moves to break free from the Zrathka's iron grip. Humanity saw an opportunity. The Dominion spies had already embedded themselves within the far reaches of Zrathka-controlled space, gathering intelligence and slowly working to create divisions. They didn't need a full-scale rebellion, just the right whispers in the right ears, the right promises made to the right people. Small rebellions began to stir in the outer worlds, rebellions that were not direct acts of war, but subtle, quiet, shifts in power. These were not battles fought with weapons, but with influence, with the careful planting of ideas that would eventually grow into something larger. The Zrathka, unaware of the extent to which they were being undermined, found themselves caught off guard as their once unshakable grip on their empire began to loosen. The Dominion's operatives worked tirelessly, weaving a web of political unrest that spread like wildfire, hidden from view yet powerful enough to change the course of the galaxy's future. As this covert campaign unfolded, the leaders of the Terran Dominion realized that they were facing a growing threat, not just from the Zrathka, but from the entire galaxy. Their quiet rise, once their greatest strength, was now their greatest vulnerability. The other galactic factions, once unconcerned with humanity's movements, were beginning to take notice of the Dominion's influence. The Zephyrians, known for their psychic abilities, had started to feel the ripples of change. The Srok, who had long dismissed humanity as a minor player, were beginning to question whether the Terran Dominion was as weak as they had once believed. Even the Aurelian Guardians, with their unyielding neutrality, had begun to shift their focus, unsure of where their loyalties would lie should conflict break out. The Dominion's secrets, carefully guarded for so long, were no longer safe. Their quiet manipulations, their unseen hand in the galaxy's affairs, had caught the attention of those who were once blind to their presence. The balance of power was shifting, and the Dominion knew that the time for subtlety was rapidly coming to an end. As the Zrathka continued to test humanity, the Dominion's leaders understood that they were at a crossroads. The war they had always feared, the one that could bring everything crashing down, was now on the horizon. But even in the face of such uncertainty, the Dominion's strength remained clear. They had the ability to move silently, to influence events without anyone knowing they were there. And perhaps, just perhaps, that was the one advantage they had left in a galaxy that was growing more dangerous with every passing day. Deep within the heart of the Terran Dominion, an event occurred that no one could have predicted, a discovery that would shake the very foundations of humanity's place in the galaxy. Hidden away for centuries, buried beneath the ruins of an ancient human colony long forgotten by time, a strange and mysterious artifact was unearthed. The artifact, unlike anything humanity had encountered before, was an object of immense power. It was a relic of humanity's distant ancestors, crafted long before the Dominion's rise to power, and it held a secret, an unimaginable weapon, one that had the potential to amplify human abilities to levels beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. This weapon, known only as the Ether Prism, was a product of ancient human ingenuity, designed to harness and enhance the mental and physical potential of a human being to an almost godlike level. For centuries, it had remained dormant, its powers locked away. But when it was uncovered and activated, it triggered something far more profound than anyone could have anticipated. The effects of the ether prism were immediate, but subtle at first. A strange ripple seemed to pulse through humanity, as if a hidden door had been unlocked deep within the human psyche. At first, it was only small things, fleeting moments of heightened senses, faster reflexes, and bursts of uncanny awareness. Some people, mostly those living on the fringes of society, began to experience odd phenomena. Some could hear things they should not have been able to. Others could move with speed and precision beyond normal human capability. A select few even began to experience flashes of precognition, seeing brief glimpses of the future or sensing danger before it arrived. It was clear, something within humanity had begun to awaken, and it wasn't a gift bestowed by alien technology or mysterious forces. No, these were the dormant abilities of human evolution itself, long hidden away beneath layers of history, society, and technology. Humanity had always been capable of more than it realized. As the awakening spread, the Dominion's leaders understood that their race had changed forever. They were no longer just a growing force in the shadows. They were becoming something else, a force of nature. The Zarathka, who had initially seen humanity as weak, insignificant, and beneath their notice, began to sense this shift. The humans they had once written off as fragile, struggling beings now seemed different. The Zarathka could feel it in the air. The Dominion was no longer the same. Humanity had something new, something the galaxy had not expected, and it was starting to manifest. Where once the Zarathka had viewed humanity as nothing more than a minor irritant, now they began to realize they were dealing with a much more formidable adversary. The human race was no longer hiding in the shadows. They were rising, fueled by the power of an ancient artifact that had awakened their true potential. The ether prism had not just triggered a change in human physiology, it had sparked something deep within the collective psyche of the Dominion. The quiet, subtle manipulation of information, the unseen hand that had once quietly guided humanity's rise, was now being paired with an entirely new kind of power. It was as if humanity had been hiding a weapon far more powerful than any fleet of ships or army of soldiers. They had been hiding their own potential, hidden abilities that now began to emerge in full force. This was no longer just a diplomatic game of politics. Humanity was no longer the underdog, quietly maneuvering in the shadows, careful to avoid drawing the attention of the galaxy's more powerful races. With the ether prism and its awakening of human potential, the time for secrecy had passed. The Dominion's power was no longer a whisper. It was a force waiting to be unleashed. The Zarathka and any other who dared to stand in humanity's way were about to face something they had not prepared for. Humanity was no longer just surviving. They were about to thrive, and the galaxy would soon learn that the Terran Dominion was a power to be reckoned with. The storm had already begun to gather, and it would only grow stronger. The question now was whether the Zarathka and the rest of the galaxy could withstand the coming wave. The Zarathka, sensing the rapid growth of humanity's newfound power, made a fateful decision. What had once been an offer of alliance was now turned into an ultimatum. The Zarathka would no longer seek cooperation, they would demand submission. Their arrogance led them to believe that humanity, with its newly awakened abilities, could be crushed before it posed any real threat. They launched a series of devastating strikes against the human colonies, expecting to break the spirit of the Dominion before it could fully rise. But in their haste, the Zarathka had made a grave miscalculation. Humanity was ready for them. Though, the Zarathka had underestimated the humans in every way. They could not have predicted the sheer resilience and resourcefulness that would define humanity's response. The Terran Dominion, once an empire that hid in the shadows, now stood tall, ready to fight. The humans, utilizing their enhanced abilities and drawing on their secretive network of allies, launched counterattacks that stunned the galaxy. What had started as small, tactical skirmishes soon escalated into full-scale battles, each one more audacious than the last. The Zrathka, powerful though they were, found themselves not facing an easy conquest, but a relentless enemy that refused to back down. The humans fought with something the Zrathka had never accounted for: their unyielding spirit. The Dominion's leadership, emboldened by the awakening of humanity's latent abilities, was able to turn the tide. What had once been a fragmented empire operating in the shadows now rose into the light, and it wasn't long before the galaxy took notice. Other factions, once passive observers or distant powers, began to rally to humanity's cause. The Serac, long accustomed to dominating through brute strength, found themselves questioning the Zrathka's tactics. The Zephyrians, whose telepathic abilities had once made them neutral players, began to feel the growing pull of the humans' fight for freedom. Even the Aurelian Guardians, known for their detached, secretive nature, couldn't ignore the rising resistance. It became clear: humanity was no longer just fighting for survival. They were fighting for something far greater: their right to exist on their own terms. And as their will to fight spread across the galaxy, others joined in, eager to throw off the shackles of Zrathka tyranny. The war, once considered an impossible struggle, had turned into a galvanizing force, uniting those who had long been oppressed or overlooked by the galaxy's powerful empires. The Zrathka, in their attempt to crush humanity's rise, had instead ignited a wildfire of resistance that they could no longer control. The battles grew fiercer, the stakes higher. Yet, through it all, humanity's true strength was revealed, not in the might of their weapons or the size of their fleets, but in the power of their unshakable determination. The Dominion had not been built through sheer military might. It had been built through the quiet, unrelenting strength of the human spirit. It was this strength that now defined them, and it was this strength that would carry them through the darkest moments of the war. The Zrathka were powerful, but they were not prepared for the relentless willpower of a species that had learned to survive against all odds. The war raged on, but with every passing day, humanity's victory seemed more inevitable. They had already proved something to the galaxy: their ability to adapt, to rise from the shadows, and to turn the tides in their favor. The question no longer seemed to be whether humanity could survive, but how the galaxy would change once the Dominion had emerged victorious. And as the battle continued to rage, one truth became clear to everyone who watched: humanity's place in the galaxy was no longer in question. The shadows had given way to a bright, burning light, and that light was humanity's, shaped by their will, their resilience, and their refusal to ever give up.